There are no rules on the open road. Not really. Just the roar of engines, the scent of hot tar, and the invisible lines of respect, territory, and fear that outlaw motorcycle clubs live and die by. Among the East Coast biker underworld, two names carry a weight that's hard to measure: Pagans Motorcycle Club and the Breed. Both born in the fires of rebellion and brotherhood, they would go on to shed blood not only for colors and pride, but for control, revenge, and raw dominance. This is the brutal story of how two American outlaw biker clubs went to war, leaving wreckage, bodies, and scars that have yet to heal. The Pagans Motorcycle Club was formed in 1959 out of Prince George's County, Maryland. They weren't originally outlaws. They started as a brotherhood of blue-collar guys, speed freaks, and mechanics who loved the open road. But the 60s were a time of upheaval. Vietnam, protests, drugs, and the outlaw biker world took shape like a steel monster on two wheels. The Pagans embraced it. By the late 1960s, they had already adopted the infamous 1% patch, proudly declaring themselves outside the bounds of society. Their insignia, the Norse fire giant Surtur, burning with a sword in hand, said it all: chaos, power, and fire. Meanwhile, up north in New Jersey, something else was brewing. The Breed MC was established in the late 1960s in Asbury Park. They were tougher than asphalt and just as unforgiving. Unlike the Pagans, the Breed didn't care for flashy mythology or godlike logos. They were raw, local, and violent. Made up of factory workers, ex-cons, and working-class men tired of being stepped on, the Breed ran their turf with tight fists. They were known to carry hammers in their saddlebags and weren't afraid to use them. In many ways, the Breed were what the Pagans used to be, before the patches, power, and politics got too big. The East Coast wasn't big enough for both. And in the outlaw world, respect isn't asked for, it's taken. At first, the two clubs existed side by side. The Pagans were spreading like wildfire into Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. The Breed held ground across northern Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, especially in towns like Elizabeth and Trenton. Tensions simmered but didn't boil yet. There were fights here and there, bar scuffles, tense standoffs, but both clubs had bigger problems. The Hells Angels were pushing in from the north. Law enforcement pressure was ramping up. The market for methamphetamine and gun running was becoming too lucrative to ignore. Money has a way of erasing alliances and drawing lines in blood. Then came the 1990s. That's when it got violent. The Pagans were on a mission. Under leaders like John Satan Marin and later more shadowy national presidents, the club adopted a paramilitary structure. Every chapter became a cog in a brutal war machine. Hits were sanctioned, enemies were tracked, informants were hunted, and the Breed stood in the way of total domination of Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. In 1991, a fight at a bar in Elizabeth turned deadly. Breed members were celebrating a patchover party, welcoming a new group of riders into the club. A group of Pagans rolled in, uninvited. Words were exchanged. Someone reached. A gun went off. By the end, one Breed prospect was dead, and another was permanently paralyzed. The Pagans denied involvement, but the message was clear. This was no longer just rivalry, it was war. The next 2 decades were soaked in gasoline and lit with fire. Drive-by shootings, firebombings, clubhouses vandalized, families threatened. The Breed, smaller in number but deadly in resolve, began hitting back. They ambushed pagan riders at rest stops. They followed them at night, waiting until they were alone. In 2002, a pagan enforcer was stabbed to death outside a strip club in Bayonne. No arrests, no witnesses, no doubt it was the Breed. Both clubs had connections to organized crime too. The Pagans were known to work closely with East Coast mafia families, trading favors and muscle for protection. The Breed, while more low-key, had their own ties to independent meth labs and prison gangs. The drug trade was a major driver. The more you controlled, the more money came in, and whoever controlled the Route 22 and I-95 corridors held the keys to a multi-million-dollar underworld economy. Undercover agents began infiltrating both clubs. The ATF had eyes everywhere. Bugs, wires, cameras. They recorded meetings, buys, initiation rituals. But what shocked them most wasn't just the criminal activity. It was the sheer hatred each club had for the other. One wiretap from a 2005 pagan meeting recorded a national officer saying, "The breed is vermin. If you see them, you stomp them, no questions." Another wiretap from a breed clubhouse had similar orders. "They think they own this state. Let's make them bleed for every fucking mile." The breed had about 70 to 100 members at their height. The Pagans over 1,500 across multiple states. It was David versus Goliath, but David had nothing to lose. That made him dangerous. In 2009, federal raids took down dozens of pagan leaders, including their then president. The breed saw an opportunity. They expanded into small towns like Phillipsburg and even tried to patch over a few rogue pagan members. That's when the retaliation began. One night in 2011, a breed member's house in Morris County was firebombed. His wife and kids barely escaped. No charges were filed. The Pagans again denied involvement. But by now, even civilians knew the score. Don't get caught in the crossfire. These wars weren't just fought in cities. They reached deep into rural backroads and highways. Truckers, tow yard operators, even tattoo artists were often caught in the middle, pressured to declare loyalty or face consequences. Neutrality wasn't respected, it was punished. Clubhouses became fortresses, barbed wire, security cameras, reinforced doors. Members stopped wearing full patches in public unless in large groups. Bars that once welcomed bikers now locked their doors early. The war had made everyone paranoid. Then came the ultimate betrayal within the breed itself. By 2015, federal investigations into drug trafficking led to the arrest of several high-ranking breed officers. Some flipped. One breed lieutenant gave up safe house locations, stashed spots, and plans to ambush pagan runs. In response, the breed imploded. Internal mistrust fractured the club. Several chapters disbanded or were absorbed into rival groups. But the Pagans didn't let up. They saw weakness and they moved in. By 2017, the breed was considered a ghost club in some areas. A handful of members still flew the colors, but their influence had waned. The Pagans now controlled most of Jersey's outlaw turf. However, in this world, no enemy stays buried forever. By 2021, whispers of a breed resurgence began to circulate. New blood, younger riders. Some were sons of old members. Others were ex-pagans or independents with a score to settle. They called themselves the True Breed and operated from underground, with no clubhouse, no paper trail, no mercy. They started small, graffiti tagging, stolen bikes, old school brawls. Then it escalated. In 2023, a pagan chapter in eastern Pennsylvania was ambushed. Their sergeant-at-arms was beaten so badly he spent weeks in the ICU. No arrests were made, but inside circles pointed to the resurgent breed. The game was back on and blood was in the water. This time, the rules had changed. The breed had learned from their past. They weren't trying to be the biggest, they were trying to be the most dangerous. Small cells, no ranks, just operators. They started using encrypted apps, burner phones, and drones. Their tactics were more militant, more efficient. And the Pagans, though still powerful, found themselves facing a ghost, a club that refused to die. As of 2025, the Pagans remain one of the largest outlaw motorcycle gangs on the East Coast. Their chapters stretch from Florida to New York, but their battles with the breed remain among the bloodiest in their history. It's a war that never ended. It only went quiet. Ask any old-timer from Trenton to Tom's River, and they'll tell you. The roads still remember. The scars on the blacktop, the bullet holes in bar walls, the empty patches on fallen brothers' vests. In this world, there's no retirement, no escape, just the ride, and the war that follows wherever the engines roar. So if you're driving through New Jersey and you see two packs of riders, one wearing the flaming Norse giant of the Pagans, the other with a snarling dog and the word breed, do yourself a favor. Pull over, let them pass. You don't want to get caught in a war that's been burning for decades and shows no signs of stopping. But to truly understand how the breed Pagans war reached this level, you have to go back to the bones of the clubs, to the men behind the patches and the roads paved in blood decades ago. This isn't just a story of bikers. It's a saga of ideology, revenge, brotherhood, and a street-level chess match that law enforcement still can't keep up with. For the Pagans, their rise was meteoric. From humble beginnings in Maryland to chapters that dotted the entire eastern seaboard, they learned quickly from the Hells Angels, who had already made their mark in California and tried to press eastward. The Pagans didn't want to follow, they wanted to dominate. They had a strict militaristic hierarchy: president, vice president, sergeant-at-arms, enforcers. Loyalty was everything. Violence wasn't just permitted, it was expected. That kind of discipline helped them take over smaller clubs throughout the 70s and 80s. And they didn't always do it with bullets. Sometimes they offered smaller MCs a choice: patch over or vanish. Many chose the former. Those who didn't, well, they're not around to tell the story. The breed was different. They didn't want expansion, they wanted respect. The breed's leadership operated more like a neighborhood syndicate. Many of their original members had criminal backgrounds, but their loyalty was to the Jersey streets. They didn't aspire to go national. They wanted to rule the Garden State and were willing to kill to keep it that way. While the Pagans were swallowing the mid-Atlantic, the breed was building bunkers in cities like Newark and Trenton. They had their own alliances with independent street crews, dock workers, and even some prison gangs. It was inevitable that the two ideologies would clash. One particularly brutal chapter of the war happened in 1998 in South Plainfield. A Pagan prospect was caught tagging over a breed wall with graffiti, an old-school form of biker disrespect. He never made it back to his bike. His body was found 2 days later, dumped in the Passaic River, his fingernails ripped out and his vest burned onto his chest. The Pagans responded by torching a garage owned by a known breed lieutenant. That same night, breed members stormed a Pagan bar hangout in Plainfield and beat 2 patch holders with crowbars in front of civilians. The message was clear. This wasn't about business anymore, it was personal. The violence began spilling into the headlines. The FBI and ATF, already struggling with biker wars in California between the Mongols and Hells Angels, now had to divert resources to New Jersey and Pennsylvania. In 2001, a massive joint operation known as Operation Iron Horse took down several mid-tier Pagan and breed members, charging them with weapons trafficking, extortion, and attempted murder. But the top brass remained untouched. These guys were smart. They communicated in code, used face-to-face meetings only, and had clean-cut citizens hold property and bank accounts in their name. Clubhouses were booby-trapped. Burn phones changed weekly. You didn't just walk into this war, you had to bleed your way in. But perhaps one of the darkest elements of this feud was how deeply it infected the prison system. Both clubs had prison chapters, inside places like Trenton State Prison and SCI Graterford in Pennsylvania. Both groups recruited heavily. Tattoos were badges of war. If you were a Pagan on the inside, you stuck with your own. The same went for the breed. In 2006, a violent prison riot at Rahway left 2 men dead and 4 hospitalized. Both were club-related. A smuggled shank had FTW, an outlaw acronym meaning "fuck the world," carved into the handle. It was a sign the war had become generational. Still, not all of it was chaos. The war also had its quiet, eerie moments, like the peace talks that never lasted. In 2010, an anonymous source within New Jersey law enforcement confirmed that a sit-down had taken place at a diner in Mount Laurel between Pagan and breed officers. It was a neutral zone, chosen by both presidents at the time. The idea was to negotiate a turf-sharing agreement, something similar to what some West Coast clubs had attempted. But it went sideways. The breed demanded that the Pagans pull out of Trenton entirely. The Pagans, in turn, demanded the breed fold into their hierarchy or face extinction. The meeting ended with no deal, and both parties leaving with hands on holsters. Days later, a breed member's truck exploded outside his home. At this point, it wasn't about drugs or weapons or turf. It was about vengeance. The people who got caught in the middle were often the prospects, the rookies. These young men, often in their early 20s, were sent to do the dirtiest work: surveillance, vandalism, bomb placement. Their reward was the chance to earn their full patch, a symbol that they were now part of something bigger. But the stakes were high. The ATF estimated that between 1995 and 2020, over 30 murders on the East Coast could be linked, directly or indirectly, to the Breed Pagan War. One especially tragic case was that of Jesse Clutch R., a 19-year-old prospect for the Breed in 2017. Surveillance footage showed him tailing two pagan riders into a Wawa gas station in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The video then captured a brawl. Jesse pulled a knife, stabbed one of the men, and fled. Days later, his body was found in a burned-out storage unit. The pagan he stabbed survived. Police believe Jesse's location was leaked by someone close to him, possibly even within his own club. No arrests were made. This pattern, young men being used as pawns, wasn't new. But by the 2020s, the clubs began recruiting even younger. Some were ex-military, others were from broken homes, lured in by the promise of brotherhood and protection. But what they entered was a machine, geared for war. Meanwhile, law enforcement ramped up its own war. In 2020, the ATF launched Operation Thunderstrike, a multi-state task force aimed at dismantling the upper ranks of outlaw motorcycle gangs on the East Coast. Dozens of raids were conducted across Jersey, Philly, and Delaware. Weapons caches were seized. One clubhouse had over 20 illegal firearms, explosives, and even flashbang grenades. In one chilling report, agents found a blackboard inside a pagan safe house with a list of names, some of them local police officers, others believed to be Breed officers. But despite the pressure, both clubs endured. The Pagans, being more organized, went underground with more discipline. They stopped hosting public events. They tightened their vetting process. The Breed, though smaller, became more violent. Their new chapters operated like cells, small, mobile, and disconnected. One hand never knew what the other was doing. This made them even harder to infiltrate. By 2024, the two clubs had essentially redrawn the map of outlaw control. The Pagans still owned central and southern Jersey, with strongholds in Camden, Vineland, and Atlantic City. The Breed controlled northern pockets, Elizabeth, Newark, and parts of Allentown. The highways between them became no man's land. Biker events at Sturgis, Daytona, or Laconia became tense zones. If members of both clubs showed up, local police went on high alert. Yet the violence hasn't slowed. In early 2025, a shooting at a highway rest stop near Reading, Pennsylvania, left 2 dead and 3 injured. Witnesses say it was a pagan convoy ambushed by unpatched riders on sport bikes, suspected to be Breed in disguise. The attackers vanished before cops arrived. One survivor told paramedics, they weren't riding for clout, they were riding for blood. Social media, which once exposed club activities, is now used strategically. The Breed has been spotted posting cryptic messages on burner accounts, photos of dog collars, war axes, and coordinates. The Pagans, in turn, post their own warnings, videos of patched members silently riding through enemy neighborhoods at night, their headlights off. This isn't fiction. This is happening in real time. And yet there's a strange honor code beneath it all. Outlaw culture, no matter how violent, still operates on principles. Brotherhood, loyalty, respect. A Breed member once said in an interview, "We don't start fights, we end them. You come at us, we don't forget. Ever." The same goes for the Pagans. For civilians, it's hard to understand this world. To outsiders, they're criminals. But to themselves, they're soldiers, living by a code no one else can comprehend. And as long as there are roads, bars, and territory to defend, men will continue to don their patches, start their engines, and ride into the fire. Because for the Pagans and the Breed, this war is more than a feud. It's legacy, it's pride. It's a bond forged not in boardrooms or handshakes, but in pain, gasoline, and the roar of steel splitting the night. And this war, it's far from over. For most people, the life of an outlaw biker is a fantasy shaped by Hollywood. Leather jackets, road trips, guns, drugs, and a bond thicker than blood. But what's left out are the shadows, the paranoia, the surveillance, the unspoken rules that bind men to a violent code, and the price you pay when that code is broken. The war between the Pagans and the breed has lasted decades because it stopped being about territory a long time ago. Now it's a machine fed by betrayal, identity, and cycles of revenge too old and too bloody to stop. By the late 2000s and 10s, both clubs had experienced something more dangerous than turf loss: infiltration. Undercover operations weren't new. Since the 1970s, the ATF and FBI had been planting agents inside motorcycle clubs across the country. But what they found in the pagan breed conflict was different. It wasn't just drugs and guns. It was assassinations, hit lists, orders passed down like military commands. And it was all wrapped in the kind of loyalty law enforcement couldn't always break. In 2018, a man known only by his undercover name, Ghost, infiltrated a satellite chapter of the Pagans in western Pennsylvania. He was a former Marine with tattoos, an arrest record, and a calm, quiet demeanor. Perfect for blending in. Over 18 months, Ghost moved from hangarounds to full prospect, eventually earning his patch after proving himself in a violent brawl against suspected breed members. What he uncovered shocked even hardened federal agents. Meeting notes, maps with clubhouses marked, weapon stashes buried in remote woods, a hand-drawn list labeled eliminations, with 10 names, half believed to be breed officers, the rest informants. But it wasn't just the Pagans. Around the same time, another agent was embedded with the breed, this time through a drug angle. The agent, who went by Rick, posed as a meth cook with connections to biker-friendly suppliers in Scranton. The breed welcomed him, but they were cautious. Their newer cells, formed after the club's fragmentation in the early 2000s and 10s, operated with militant secrecy. No phones, no social media. All communication was verbal, and chapter meetings were held in rotating locations, sometimes even in graveyards at night to avoid bugs. Rick reported seeing weapons drills, physical combat training, and one disturbing incident where a new recruit was forced to kneel for 3 hours while officers interrogated him about his past. Ghost and Rick never met, but their reports told a chilling story. The war had matured. It was no longer reckless violence. It was calculated, methodical, strategic. The pagan higher-ups were now running like a cartel. The breed had adopted guerrilla tactics. No more flashy rides, no more clubhouse parties. These clubs were preparing for something bigger. A final push? A massive turf war? No one knew. But the evidence painted a chilling picture. And then came the biggest betrayal of all. In 2019, a high-ranking pagan officer, known as Snake, turned informant. He had been with the club for over 15 years, a respected enforcer, a man who had allegedly ordered and carried out hits. He had served time, earned stripes, but Snake had a weakness. His teenage son had been arrested on federal gun charges, and prosecutors offered a deal. Cooperate, or your son does 20 years. Snake broke. His cooperation led to one of the largest busts in club history. Over 60 pagans were arrested across 7 states. Weapons, drugs, and documents were seized. More devastatingly, Snake gave up internal structure details, club finances, methods of laundering through tattoo shops and trucking companies, names of wives and girlfriends who held burner accounts. It was a nuclear bomb inside the Brotherhood. The pagans responded swiftly. Retaliation crews were dispatched. Snake's extended family disappeared from their homes overnight under federal protection. Every remaining member was ordered to cut all digital ties. Inside club culture, the word snake became code for treason. But this leak also emboldened the breed. With the pagans weakened by arrests, the breed pushed forward. They reopened old clubhouses, re-established routes through Phillipsburg and Bethlehem, and even began talks with former Mongols MC affiliates on the East Coast. Their tactics remained underground. No open recruiting, no internet presence. But one thing was clear: they were rebuilding, and fast. The breed also took the opportunity to settle scores. One evening in March 2020, a pagan chapter president was leaving a bar in Allentown. He was followed by 2 men on bikes wearing no patches. Less than a mile from the bar, he was shot twice in the back. Surveillance footage later showed the shooters flashing a black and red bandana to a nearby street camera, before disappearing into the night. It wasn't proof, but everyone in the outlaw world knew what it meant. This wasn't justice. This was ritual. Behind the scenes, the psychological toll on members was growing. Prospects were now being asked to do more than just run errands. They were being tested with missions, tailing suspected snitches, sabotaging rival bikes, even intimidation of civilians. The pressure cooker environment meant many cracked. Some quit, others vanished. For those who stayed, the line between survival and self-destruction blurred. In an anonymous interview published in 2022 by a biker-focused zine, a former breed enforcer described life during the height of the war. You slept in your boots. You didn't park the bike in the same spot twice. You checked your engine for bombs. You walked into every bar like you were already bleeding. You smiled at guys you were planning to kill, and they smiled back. That kind of constant paranoia turns men into monsters, or ghosts. But even monsters have moments of clarity. In 2023, a pagan member, known only as Razor, walked into a New Jersey precinct, laid down his cut, his biker vest, and said 4 words, "I'm done with it." Razor had been with the club since 2005. He'd survived stabbings, prison time, and internal purges. But what broke him wasn't war, it was silence. The kind of silence that followed the murder of a close friend's son, mistakenly killed in a breed drive-by. Razor said the kid had nothing to do with the club, he was just wearing a Harley hoodie. That's when Razor realized this war no longer had rules. His testimony wasn't enough for indictments, but it painted a clearer picture of what the conflict had become. No longer about symbols or honor, it was now just about retaliation. Every act of violence fueled another. Every firebomb justified the next ambush. The pagan breed feud had become a loop of death that neither side knew how to stop. Today the war lives on, though quieter, more hidden, less obvious. Some clubhouses now operate as legitimate businesses, fronts maybe, but also a way to rebuild reputation in the public eye. Local towns, tired of biker violence, have begun pushing back with zoning laws and surveillance grants. Police departments hold annual biker threat assessments, often citing the pagan breed war as the most volatile in the region. And yet the stories continue. A burned-out bike on a lonely road in Hackensack, a tattoo parlor in Philly that gets shot up during closing time, a warehouse in Newark raided, revealing black vests sewn with dog snarls and flaming swords. Small things, but signs. Omens. Because here's the truth. For every generation that steps away from this life, there's another drawn to it. Sons of members, disillusioned veterans, ex-cons looking for structure, men who feel the pull of brotherhood, of power, of riding with a purpose, even if that purpose is destruction. The pagan breed war has now lasted over 30 years, and it doesn't show signs of ending. Not because they love war, but because they don't know peace. In the outlaw world, peace is weakness. Peace means someone else takes your turf, your honor, your brothers, and so they keep riding, keep retaliating, keep burying the dead and recruiting the young. What started as a clash over territory has become legend, a myth told in whispers, a war that's part of East Coast outlaw folklore, the kind of story that patch holders tell at midnight, around barrels of fire, with road dust still on their boots. And so, if you ever see a lone biker riding the Jersey Turnpike, no patches, no colors, but with eyes that scan every rearview mirror and hand that never leaves the throttle, know this. You're looking at a ghost of the pagan breed war, a survivor, a soldier, or maybe just a man waiting for the next bullet. In a world where loyalty is currency and vengeance never sleeps, the war between the pagans and the breed still rides on, unseen, unspoken, but never forgotten. Behind every patch lies a story, and some of them are still being written in blood. If you found this story gripping, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the dark corners of outlaw history, and leave a comment. What do you think fuels a war that never ends? Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, some roads were never meant for civilians.